Welcome to Macaron ingredients. So the first thing you want is 100 grams of granulated sugar. Second is 200 of powdered sugar. I just put this in the same bowl with my almond flour, so I measure out the 200 and then I zero out the scale and then just add my almond flour to it, because you're going to have to mix those two together anyway before you sift. So to me, it just makes it easier just to go ahead and put it all in one bowl, and it saves on extra dishes to wash as well. So we're just going to do the 115 of almond flour with 200 grams of powdered sugar. And you just want to mix those in. If you try to sift almond flour, I have found without mixing the powdered sugar in with it, you'll actually end up with almond butter, like peanut butter. You'll release the oils out of that almond flour and it'll just turn to a paste. So very easy to just measure all this out in one bowl, mix it together. I just kind of go through, make sure all the chunks of almond flour have been kind of coated by that powdered sugar. And then I'm going to grab another bowl so that I can sift this mixture into another bowl. So you just grab your sifter, pour this almond flour and powdered sugar mixture in with your spatula. I just use the little small rubber or silicone spatula. I don't pour all of it in there at once. To me, it just does better if you do it in sections. So I just do about half and half. And I got this sifter at Williams-Sonoma. It's been one of my favorite ones. All the other ones I've ever had, they rust really bad. I've had this one for, I don't know, 2 years now, I think. It has not rusted yet. So you just want to make sure that all of the powdered sugar and almond flour gets down in there. One of the big reasons why we do this is to make sure that you don't have any clumps of like the skin from the almonds, which I use blanched almond flour, and typically that does better, but you always end up with these little, I don't know, granules or crummies, or I don't even know what you call them, but anyway, so that's why you want to sift this, is A, to make sure that your powdered sugar is really well sifted, but 2, to get that really smooth finish on the top of your macarons. This step is really important. And so you want to make sure that you don't have any of these crummies. And I'll show you this in just a few minutes when I get through sifting. I'll pour these out in my hand and show you what's left and show you what you don't want in your mixture. And so I'm just looking now to see if there's any powdered sugar or anything left. And I see a little bit of powdered sugar on the bottom there. So I'm going to sift just another minute and get the rest of that out, so that all I'm left with are the little bits that I don't want in my batter. And you can see there, they're almost like, it almost looks like couscous. Y'all, I promise I didn't put couscous in there, but that's kind of what it looks like. And so I just toss that and get that out of my mixture. So the next thing you want is your 3 large egg whites. Make sure when you're separating these that you don't get any of the yolk in there. If you do, it will not, it won't whip. It'll just stay flat. So if you happen to get yolk in there, I hate to say it, but you're going to have to pour it out and start over. You don't want it. You also want to make sure that your mixer bowl is clean. So anytime I do this, I always re-wash my mixer bowl really well with hot, soapy water, is so frustrating if you end up not washing it and it won't do. This is cream of tartar. If you live in the humid South like I do, you want cream of tartar. If you're doing these on a humid day, I always add this to my egg whites, and I just do just a pinch. I'm sure there's recipes out there that'll give you the exact measurement. I don't have it. I just do just a little bit. I actually have these little measuring spoons. One is a smidge, one is a pinch. So that's what I use for mine. Pretty scientific method there. So next step is to pour your egg whites in your mixer with the whisk attachment. You don't have to have a fancy KitchenAid. You can do this with a hand mixer. So I'm just going to get the cream of tartar mixed in there. Turn the speed up a little bit. And you're going to mix this until it's frothy, and then you'll add your granulated sugar. I do want to say it's very important to make sure that you have all of your ingredients measured out and ready to go before you start mixing. You don't want to try to stop in the middle of each step here, especially on macarons, and you'll see why. They're very finicky. Every step has to be just right. So I hope that all of the things in this video translate over. The meringue is starting to form here. It's getting frothy. So we're going to start adding in the granulated sugar. Turn that down so it doesn't sling the sugar everywhere. And then once that kind of mixes in for a second, we're going to turn that back up. Now, if your egg whites are not at room temp, it will take what seems like forever for you to be able to whisk them to medium peaks. Okay, so I've turned it up and just going to let this whisk. Don't rush this step. This step is extremely important. The three steps that are very important are your almond flour and powdered sugar being mixed and sifted. The second step that is very important is to mix your egg whites and sugar the correct amount of time, and you want what I refer to as 11 o'clock. And you'll see this when I pull the whisk attachment out. Don't rush this step. Take your time. Make sure that you let this mix or whisk long enough to get these egg whites where they need to be. So we're just going to let it mix. You'll know that they're almost ready when you see the lines from your whisk attachment sort of stay put, if that makes sense. You'll notice that it doesn't fall back into itself like it's doing right now. You can tell it's really runny. There's nothing stiff about this meringue right now. You want to let it run until you can tell that it's gone from this stage to the stage to where it's fluffy, it's stiffer. So just let it mix. And again, I can't stress enough, don't rush this. This part is so important. I don't know how many macarons I have ruined because I didn't make sure that my meringue was where it needed to be. So you can see it's starting to hold its shape a little bit. But as I pull this, you can still see how runny this is. You can see that if this is just not anywhere close to being medium to stiff peak. So we're going to let it run a little bit longer. So we're letting it run a little longer here until we get to that medium stiff peak, or I like to call it 11 o'clock. And you'll see why when I pull the whisk attachment out. You don't want to under mix or under whisk your meringue, okay? It will not, trust me, will not work. If you've over whisked, that's fine. We can work with that. This, however, is the perfect consistency. It's pointing over to the 11 o'clock hour on the clock. Well, that one didn't anyway. This is the perfect consistency. Again, if it's runny, put it back in, whisk it a little longer. If those peaks stand straight up and they don't lean over at all, that's fine. You can knock the air out of that, but we cannot work with under whisked meringue. You'll have to keep going with it until you get to at least this stage. And you want to make sure that you have a nice silicone or rubber spatula for this next step. You're going to want to fold in the almond flour powdered sugar portion of the recipe into your now meringue. And when you fold in, and you'll see how I do this, you fold in and you want to push the almond flour powdered sugar into that meringue. You'll actually hear it kind of, you can tell that it's knocking air out of it. And that's the whole point of what you're going to be doing here. So you're going to just fold it in and push down on what you've just folded, and you'll see the whole motion that I make with this spatula. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to add in your mixture 1/3 at a time. And notice I also have my flavoring over here to the side. Once you've added the second third of the almond flour or powdered sugar, that's when you're going to put in your flavoring. So you see this motion. I'm picking it up and I'm pushing it, and picking up and pushing. I'm actually pushing down on that spatula against my bowl, knocking air out of that meringue. And once that first third is added in and incorporated into the meringue, then you add your second third. And again, I'm just picking it up and pushing it against the bowl. You don't want to over mix during this step. You just want to mix until that second third of powdered sugar and almond flour is incorporated into the meringue. And then you go ahead and add in your flavoring. For me, I'm just doing vanilla. I don't have a certain favorite of any of these. I have found that one is just as good as the other. I tend to try to get mine at like Marshall's or TJ Maxx if I want to buy like a vanilla bean paste or something like that. You get them considerably cheaper there. So we're adding in now the last third and just making sure that everything's off the side of the bowl. You want everything incorporated. So I'm just going to scrape down the sides. And again, I'm bringing it around and I'm pushing into the bowl. I'm not sure if that's translating very well onto the video, but so I'm just bringing the spatula around, picking this up. And make sure you get in the bottom portion of the bowl, because sometimes the powdered sugar and powdered sugar and almond flour likes to hang out in the center at the very bottom. So make sure you get those bits too added in there. Now you don't want to overmix. This is another step that is crucial in your macaron process. You want to mix until it starts to ribbon. If when you hold this up on your spatula and it just falls off instead of ribboning off of your spatula, then you've not macaronized your batter long enough. So you'll see it just fell right off. So we've got to go a little bit longer. You just really want to make sure that you go long enough on this step. Give yourself time. And once you get to the point to where it's almost starting to ribbon, only fold in just a few more times before you check it again. It's very easy at this stage to over mix. And that, again, I can't stress enough how finicky these things are. And here is perfect. It's ribboning off. It's not breaking free from that spatula. And once I lay this batter over itself, it sinks in. It starts to rest on itself. It starts to fall back into the batter that's in the bowl. And that's exactly where you want it to be. So here now we're ready to put this mixture into a piping bag. I use the disposable piping bags. I don't really have a favorite, just as long as they're thick. Walmart has the rolls of piping bags. I will say that I do get the 16-inch, at least 16-inch piping bags when I'm doing macarons, because one batch fills up almost that whole bag. So I like to make sure that I have enough room in the bag. So here you're just going to cut the tip off of the bag. Whenever you're going to pipe out your batter, don't do it from an angle like this or like this. You want to go straight up and down. And you fill it just to that dark line, or at least that's what has always worked best for me. The bigger macarons, in my experience, don't form feet as well as the smaller ones. I have no idea what the science is behind that. I don't know why. It may only happen to me. And I'm really sorry if I just led you in the wrong direction. But for me, that is what has always worked best. I love these silicone mats. You can get them at Walmart. You can get them on Amazon. I'm quite sure there's tons of other places. That's just the only two that I've ever bought them from. So these are perfect. You can use parchment paper. I have before. I had multiple of these. Would cut out parchment paper, lay on top of this, use it as a guide, and just keep using parchment paper on this one mat. You can do it that way. There's lots of other ways you can do this, but these are just so helpful in measuring them out, because you want each shell or biscuit to be relatively close to the same size, so that when you put them together, you're not going to have a really small one and have to pair it with a really big one. You want them all to be relatively close in size. So that's another reason why I always just go to the first circle and just fill them to there. I do hold the bag up off of or away from the mat about 1/4 of an inch while I'm piping. I don't hold it right against. And again, try to always hold it straight up and down. It's been my experience in the past, if I hold it at an angle, believe it or not, and I don't know why, they will rise at an angle. You'll have one side that will have that perfectly formed foot, and the other side will be flat against the pan. I can't explain it. I don't know why. It just happens that way. Also, make sure that whenever you're putting your pans in the oven, uh, and I used to bake in our camper oven, which, if you can believe that, was quite the task. At any rate, sometimes the grates in that oven would get off center, and the macarons, if those pans are not completely flat when you're baking, they will slide. The tops will slide right off of the feet. They're finicky. They're very good. They're very delicate and elegant, but they are a pain if you do one step incorrectly. I'm just going to continue piping these out. Typically, this size will hold one batch of macarons. These two will hold one batch of macarons for me. Now, another thing to know is it's very important after you get these piped out. You want to, I don't bang them on my counter just because I don't want to bang them on my counter. I hit my hand under them like I'm burping a cake. Drives my husband insane because, he's always trying to watch TV when I'm doing this. So you want to knock all the air bubbles, and you want to see the little kisses on the top where I pipe them. You want all of that to fall down into itself. You want the top of that shell, or biscuit, if you will, to be smooth and even. So see how smooth that is compared to the ones that I just piped over here. Those have fallen out to that outside circle. See how they start on the inside where you've piped them. And once you knock the air out of them and you get them flattened a little, they will spread out to that outside circle. Another piece to know on this is you want to look for air bubbles in your shells. I have a little scribe that I use. It's the same thing that I use when I'm doing the royal icing cookies. And you can also use a toothpick. But you want to make sure that if you see any air bubbles in the top of the shells, you want to get those out. And I know that's probably seems like overkill or, useless, but it really does make a difference. And I'm not sure how well this is translating over onto the video, but you can see these. And so what I do is I just start at the center and I pull back. I pull away from that bubble and it will pop. And you can see that batter. And so then I just go in and circle around until that fills back in. And once I have done all of the air bubbles that I can find, you can actually either tap your pan back on the counter or the table, or you can do it like I do it and just hit it with your hand, just to make sure that you flattened all of that back out that you just messed with your scribe or your toothpick or whatever it was you chose to use. I really love when those tops of the shells are just really smooth, really pretty. It also makes it to where when you set those down after you've assembled your macarons, they just lay on the plate or your display or wherever you have them. They lay really well instead of them rocking all over the place. To me, it makes a huge difference when you've paid attention to each little step. And so you can see here, I'm just doing this again, circling my scribe around, filling that hole back in from where the air bubble was. I'm looking for more. Please take the time to do this step. It really is going to make a difference in the end result. Instead of you having holes in your shells and really thin, crispy parts and then nothing because you've had a hole there, you'll have that consistency throughout the shell of your macaron after they've baked. And so again, I'm just filling that in, circling around so that that air bubble will fill back in on itself. There's another one there. So we're just going to pull it out, go from the center, pull it out from all directions, circle back so that that will fill back in. And just don't forget to tap that back out on your pan once you've gotten all the air bubbles out. Now, I have a small fan that I always set up. I live in Alabama. It's humid here. There's no, if you live out west, when we lived in Arizona, I didn't have to use a fan. I didn't have to use cream of tartar. These things dried within a matter of minutes. There are days here in Alabama that I can let these sit out and they don't form a crust for an hour. That never happened in Arizona. So I do have a small fan that I always have set up to blow on these. Because they're wet to begin with, right? You've just piped them out. They're sticky. They're not ready. You cannot put these in the oven right now. So we let these sit under the fan until they have formed a skin. You want to have your oven preheated to 295 to 300. You cannot put these in the oven until the skin is formed and you can run your finger across the top without it, transferring onto your finger. You're going to bake these for approximately 11 to 13 minutes. Okay, I have baked these now for 13 minutes on 295, and they're perfect. They're ready. They smell phenomenal. My son has picked out a red velvet filling to go in them, so I've got to make that next, and we will be assembling macarons. I have found it best to get the shells off of your silicone mat is to lift them from underneath, because when you try to pull them from the top like I just did there, you can tell it's not letting go. And so I always go from under and roll the macaron off of the silicone mat. I'm not sure what the difference is, but it works, so I do it. And you see it comes off perfect. Man, that's great. I've cried so many tears over these things. You can also turn your mat over and just roll off your macarons, and then they're already perfectly aligned for you to fill. So you just want to pair them up, fill them, and then it's time for assembly. When you're pushing your tops onto your macarons, don't push too hard. These are extremely delicate. I hope you love this video. Please leave any comments or questions.